Ever imagined losing everything overnight? What happens when a life of privilege transforms into a daily struggle for survival? Discover how Stoic philosophy turned Beatriz's downfall into her greatest rise, a powerful journey about finding strength in adversity and building a life with real purpose. This story will change your perspective on what truly matters. The luxurious Morgan mansion stood out in the Westchester County landscape. Beatriz Morgan, 25, wandered through the spacious rooms, with the characteristic boredom of someone who never had to fight for anything. Her closet, the size of an apartment, housed clothes she never wore twice. In her garage, a Porsche she barely drove. Her life was a succession of social events, extravagant shopping, and trips to exclusive destinations. Beatriz, don't forget. The charity gala tonight. Eleanor, her mother, reminded her while adjusting her pearls in the entrance hall mirror. The Sinclairs will be there, and your father made a substantial donation. It would be strange if you didn't attend. With a dramatic sigh, Beatriz agreed. Small inconveniences were the maximum adversity she had ever faced. Little did she know that the universe was about to teach her a lesson that no elite school could offer. Richard Morgan's prestigious investment firm occupied the top floors of a Manhattan skyscraper. That Tuesday morning began like any other, until FBI agents stormed through the glass doors. "Richard Morgan, you're under arrest for securities fraud and money laundering," announced the lead agent, as employees watched in shock. The news spread. Like wildfire, Morgan indicted in massive Ponzi scheme. Overnight, the Morgan empire crumbled. Assets frozen, accounts emptied, reputation destroyed. For Beatriz, it was as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "This is a mistake," she insisted to her mother, as movers carried away their furniture. Daddy wouldn't do this, but the evidence was overwhelming. Richard had been running a sophisticated fraud for years, and now thousands of investors had lost everything. Within weeks, Beatriz found herself in a tiny one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood she would have previously avoided. Her phone, once constantly buzzing with invitations, fell silent. Former friends shared pictures from parties she wasn't invited to. The fall from grace was total and merciless. "I don't know how to do this," Beatriz whispered to her reflection in the bathroom mirror, her designer clothes replaced by basics from a discount store. The manager of Green's Coffee barely glanced at Beatriz's resume. "No work experience? At 25, he asked skeptically. "I can learn quickly," she replied, swallowing her pride. Her first paycheck barely covered groceries and utilities. The work was physically demanding and emotionally draining. Customers yelled over incorrect orders. Her feet ached from standing all day, and the smell of coffee clung to her hair and clothes. One evening, exhausted and defeated, Beatriz wandered into a public library seeking warmth and quiet. As she explored the shelves, a book caught her eye. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. "You might like this," said an elderly librarian, noticing her interest. "Ancient wisdom for modern problems." That night, by the dim light of a second-hand lamp, Beatriz read the words that would change her trajectory. "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." She paused, rereading the passage. Could her downfall actually be a path forward? The idea seemed absurd, yet something resonated deep within her. The next morning, when a customer berated her over a minor mistake, instead of breaking down, Beatriz remembered another passage. "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been." She took a deep breath. "I apologize for the mistake. Let me fix that for you right away." Beatriz began carrying meditations everywhere, reading passages during breaks and before bed. The ancient emperor's words offered a perspective she'd never considered. Her circumstances weren't a punishment, but an opportunity to develop inner strength. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength," she read one evening, underlining the words, "A with intensity." 6 months into her new life, Beatriz enrolled in night classes at a community college. The financial aid office had become familiar territory, and the shame she once felt asking for help had gradually subsided. After closing the coffee shop one night, she noticed a flyer on the bulletin board. "Understanding Stoicism, weekly discussion group." The following Thursday, she nervously entered the community center. The group was small, just 8 people sitting in a circle, led by Professor David Chen. Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotions, he explained. It's about focusing on what you can control and accepting what you can't. After the meeting, Professor Chen approached her. You had insightful comments. Is this your first time studying Stoicism? Beatriz smiled slightly. Formally, yes, but lately I've been getting a crash course in applied Stoicism. When she shared snippets of her story, David's expression remained thoughtful rather than pitying. You know, the Stoics believed that prosperity often prevents us from knowing ourselves. Adversity reveals character. Walking home, Beatriz felt something unfamiliar stirring within her. Not happiness exactly, but a quiet determination. The first anniversary of her father's arrest arrived with unexpected clarity. Beatriz rose before dawn and performed her new morning ritual, meditation followed by journaling, practices she'd adopted from her Stoic studies. She wrote, "1 year ago, I believed my life was ending. Now I see it was just beginning." At work, Beatriz had been promoted to shift supervisor. Her manager noted her remarkable patience with difficult customers and her resilience during stressful situations. "How do you stay so calm?" asked Zoe, a new barista, after a particularly chaotic morning rush. Beatriz considered the question. "I've learned to distinguish between what I can and cannot control. The customer's mood, not mine to control. How I respond, that's up to me." That evening, she visited her mother in the small apartment Eleanor now shared with her sister. Once, the epitome of Upper East Side elegance, Eleanor appeared aged beyond her years, still struggling to adjust to their new reality. "I saw Catherine Sinclair yesterday," Eleanor said, voice hollow. She pretended not to see me. "Mom, the Sinclairs were never real friends," Beatriz replied gently. "Real friendship isn't conditional on status." Eleanor looked at her daughter with surprise. "When did you become so wise?" "When I had no choice but to grow up," Beatriz answered. She pulled out her dog-eared copy of Meditations and offered it to her mother. "This might help, like it helped me." As she left her mother's apartment, Beatriz realized she no longer yearned for her old life. The transformation had been so gradual she hadn't noticed it happening. Spring arrived, bringing with it a new opportunity. Professor Chen approached Beatriz after a Stoicism discussion. "There's an internship opening at Ethical Horizons, a startup focused on transparent investment practices. Given your background and your journey, I think you'd be perfect for it." Beatriz hesitated. "I'm not sure the financial world wants anything to do with someone named Morgan right now." "Perhaps that's exactly why they need you," David countered. "Your experience gives you unique insight." The interview was scheduled for the following week. Beatriz prepared meticulously, studying the company and crafting thoughtful answers about ethical finance. Meanwhile, her mother called with unexpected news. "Your father wants to see you. He's been asking for months." The federal prison was a 2-hour bus ride away. Beatriz hadn't visited since the sentencing. "I'll think about it," she promised, feeling the familiar knot of complicated emotions. That night she turned to Epictetus. "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." The prison visit and job interview fell on consecutive days. As she packed her bag, Beatriz added a small notebook with her favorite Stoic quotes, reminders of how far she'd come. In her journal, she wrote, "2 meetings with my past. One with my father who built a financial empire on lies, and one with an industry I once took for granted. I approach both with neither expectation nor resentment, but with an open heart and clear eyes." The woman who boarded the bus the next morning was unrecognizable from the Beatriz of 2 years ago, not just in appearance, but in essence. The visiting room at Westlake Federal Correctional Facility hummed with subdued conversations. Beatriz sat rigidly at a small table, waiting. When Richard Morgan appeared in his prison uniform, she barely recognized him. Gone was the commanding presence that once dominated boardrooms. Before her stood a diminished man with graying hair. "B," he said, voice cracking. They stared at each other across a chasm of consequence. "You look well," Richard offered awkwardly. "I am well," she replied evenly. Not because of circumstances, but in spite of them. Their conversation started stilted, but gradually found rhythm. Richard described prison life, the monotony, the regrets, the time for reflection. "I've learned more about myself in here than in 60 years out there," he admitted. "Me too," Beatriz said, "though my prison has been metaphorical." Richard's eyes welled with tears. "I'm sorry, B, I destroyed everything." She considered his apology, remembering Seneca's words about forgiveness being beneficial to the forgiver. "I'm not here to absolve you, Dad. I'm here because carrying resentment was becoming too heavy. I don't deserve your forgiveness." "This isn't about deserving," Beatriz replied. "It's about choosing what kind of person I want to be." As their visitation time ended, Richard asked about her life. When she mentioned the interview at Ethical Horizons, genuine pride flickered across his face. "They'd be lucky to have you," he said. "You understand something I never did, that integrity isn't negotiable." Leaving the prison, Beatriz felt lighter. Not because everything was resolved, but because she'd faced her pain without being consumed by it. Another Stoic lesson made real. The Ethical Horizons office occupied a modest space in a refurbished industrial building, a stark contrast to her father's gleaming skyscraper. Beatriz took a deep breath before entering, centering herself as she'd learned through Stoic practice. Inside, she was greeted by Eliza Washington, the company's founder. "So, you're Richard Morgan's daughter," Eliza stated directly, studying Beatriz with sharp eyes. "Yes, but I hope you'll judge me on my own merits, not my father's mistakes," Beatriz replied calmly. A hint of approval crossed Eliza's face. "That's exactly what I intend to do." The interview was rigorous. Eliza probed not only Beatriz's academic knowledge, but her understanding of ethical finance and her personal journey. "Why should I hire someone with your last name, a name synonymous with financial fraud?" Eliza asked bluntly. Beatriz had anticipated this question. "Because I've lived the consequences of unethical decisions. I've seen firsthand the human cost when finance becomes detached from morality. That perspective is valuable." After the interview, Beatriz walked to a nearby park. Whatever the outcome, she was proud of how she'd conducted herself, focusing on what she could control and accepting what she couldn't. Her phone rang 3 hours later. "We'd like to offer you the internship," Eliza said. "Your perspective is indeed valuable, but understand this. You'll be under intense scrutiny. Some clients will walk away when they hear your name." "I understand," Beatriz replied. "I'm prepared to earn trust through actions, not expectations." That evening, as she shared the news with her mother, Eleanor asked, "Aren't you afraid? What if you fail?" Beatriz smiled. "The Stoics taught me that fear and anxiety come from wanting to control outcomes. I'm focused on the process, not the result." Beatriz's first weeks at Ethical Horizons were challenging. As predicted, some clients balked at working with a Morgan. Others questioned her qualifications. Even some colleagues kept their distance, wary of her infamous surname. Instead of becoming defensive, Beatriz applied Marcus Aurelius's teaching, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." She responded to suspicion with diligence, to dismissal with courtesy, to hostility with understanding. Gradually, her colleagues began to see beyond her name. Among them was Michael Chen, no relation to Professor Chen, a brilliant financial analyst whose quiet integrity reminded her of Stoic principles in action. "How do you deal with people expecting you to fail?" Michael asked one evening as they worked late on a presentation. "I remind myself that their opinions exist in their minds, not mine," Beatriz replied. "I can't control their thoughts, only my actions." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "That's a powerful perspective." Their friendship grew naturally, built on mutual respect and shared values. When Michael invited her to dinner, Beatriz hesitated, uncertain about blending her personal and professional lives. She consulted her journal. Epictetus says, "Natural affection is fitting for a rational creature. Fear of connection isn't Stoicism. It's hiding." The dinner revealed a deeper bond. Michael shared stories of growing up in modest circumstances, working multiple jobs to fund his education. "We had opposite journeys," Beatriz observed. "You started with nothing and built something. I started with everything and lost it. Yet here we both are," Michael replied. Maybe different paths can lead to the same destination. Walking home, Beatriz realized she hadn't thought about her former life in months. Her identity was no longer anchored to what she'd lost, but to what she'd found. 6 months into her internship, Beatriz's resilience was tested again. Ethical Horizons was preparing to launch a new platform aimed at helping individuals recover from financial fraud, exactly the type her father had perpetrated. "We want you to lead this project," Eliza announced during a team meeting. "Your personal connection makes you uniquely qualified." The assignment felt like standing at the edge of a precipice. Accepting meant publicly embracing her connection to one of the largest financial scandals in recent memory. "People will talk," Michael cautioned privately after the meeting. "Are you ready for that kind of scrutiny?" Beatriz thought of Seneca's words. "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." "I think I am," she replied. "Besides, when has avoiding discomfort ever led to growth?" The project required interviewing fraud victims, people like those her father had harmed. Before each interview, Beatriz practiced premeditatio malorum, the Stoic exercise of anticipating difficulties, preparing herself for potential hostility. During one session, an elderly man named Robert Jenkins studied her face intently. "You look like him," he said suddenly. "Richard Morgan. I lost my retirement to him." The room fell silent. Beatriz met his gaze steadily. "Yes, he's my father. That's why this work matters to me." To her surprise, Robert nodded with understanding. "Good. Then you'll make sure it's done right." That evening, Beatriz called her father at the prison. Their conversations had become more regular, though still complicated. "I'm working with people you hurt," she told him. "Trying to create something that might prevent others from doing what you did." Richard was quiet for a moment. "There's a certain justice in that." "Not justice," Beatriz corrected. "Restoration. Different thing entirely." The evening before the platform's launch, Beatriz found herself standing in front of her bathroom mirror, practicing the speech she would deliver to potential investors and media. As the public face of the project, she would be stepping fully into the spotlight, embracing rather than hiding from her family history. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "The New York Times is running a feature on your project tomorrow." A reporter called me for comment. Minutes later, another text arrived. "They're framing it as Morgan's daughter works to undo father's damage. Are you sure about this?" Beatriz closed her eyes, centering herself. The Stoics taught that external events themselves are neutral. It's our judgments about them that create distress. This media coverage was neither good nor bad inherently. It was simply a circumstance to navigate. "I'm sure," she replied to her mother. "This is my path." The launch event was held in a downtown conference center. As Beatriz prepared backstage, Michael appeared with a small package. "For luck," he said, handing it to her, "though you'd probably say a Stoic doesn't believe in luck." Inside was a simple bracelet engraved with words from Epictetus. "Make the best use of what is in your power." She slipped it on, just as Eliza introduced her to the crowded room. Walking to the podium, Beatriz felt a strange calm descend. The faces before her, investors, journalists, even some of her father's victims, were not judges but witnesses to transformation. 3 years ago, she began, I was the privileged daughter of a successful financier. I had everything, except character. Then, my father's crimes were exposed, and my family's world collapsed. The room was utterly silent. That collapse was the most valuable thing that ever happened to me. Beatriz's speech sent ripples through the financial world. The story of a fallen dynasty's daughter rising to combat financial fraud captured the public imagination. Interview requests flooded in, investors expressed interest, and Ethical Horizons found itself thrust into the spotlight. "We've received double our projected funding," Eliza announced at an emergency staff meeting. "And over 50 financial institutions want to implement our platform." When a colleague suggested capitalizing on Beatriz's newfound fame with a more aggressive marketing campaign, she gently pushed back. "The Stoics warn about the dangers of external validation," she explained. "Let's focus on substance rather than spectacle." Her stance earned her respect, but also created tensions. Some board members argued they'd be foolish not to leverage the attention. Meanwhile, personal complications arose. Beatriz's relationship with Michael had deepened, but the scrutiny made private moments increasingly rare. Paparazzi had begun following her, hoping to construct narratives about the Morgan heiress and her redemption arc. One evening, after dodging photographers outside her apartment, Beatriz found Michael waiting inside with takeout dinner. "How are you handling all this?" he asked. "By remembering that fame, like disgrace, is temporary and external," she replied, though her exhaustion was evident. "But I admit I didn't anticipate this level of intrusion." Later that night, she received a call from an unknown number. It was Catherine Sinclair, once her mother's closest friend, who had cut all ties after the scandal broke. "Beatriz, darling," Catherine gushed, "I've been thinking of reconnecting, perhaps lunch next week. I'm chairing a charity gala and would love your involvement." The familiar world of social climbing and shallow connections, once her entire existence, now felt alien. Her father's crime had destroyed that life, but Stoicism had taught her not to rebuild it, but to construct something more meaningful from the ruins. "I'm afraid I'm quite busy these days," Beatriz replied calmly. "But thank you for thinking of me." The true test was approaching. Tomorrow the platform would go live, confronting the very system her father had manipulated and offering protection to those most vulnerable. 3 years to the day since her father's arrest, Beatriz stood in the Ethical Horizons office watching the platform go live. The system, designed to detect fraudulent patterns and provide early warnings to investors, represented everything she had become: vigilant, principled, resilient. The team celebrated this milestone. Eliza pulled her aside. "There's someone here to see you." In the conference room waited Eleanor, elegantly dressed but with a simplicity that reflected their new circumstances, alongside a man Beatriz didn't immediately recognize. "Dad?" she whispered, taking in his civilian clothes and newly silver hair. Richard Morgan, released on parole just hours earlier, stood with an uncertainty that had never characterized him before. "I didn't want to disrupt your moment," he said softly, "but I wanted to see it." The room fell silent as father and daughter regarded each other, a living tableau of fall and redemption. "May I show you what we've built?" Beatriz finally asked as Guy. She demonstrated the platform. Richard's expression shifted from curiosity to painful recognition. "This section," he said, pointing to a particular alert system, "would have caught exactly what I did." His voice broke slightly. "It would have stopped me." "That's the point," Beatriz replied gently. Later, as the three Morgans stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, Richard turned to his daughter. "When I went to prison, I feared I'd destroyed you along with everything else. Instead, you've become," he searched for words, "extraordinary in ways I never taught you." "Actually, you did teach me," Beatriz replied. "Your downfall showed me that external success without internal virtue is meaningless. That lesson led me to Stoicism, which taught me that true wealth lies in character, not circumstances." She removed the bracelet Michael had given her and placed it in her father's palm. "Make the best use of what is in your power," she said, closing his fingers around it. Richard looked down at the small gift, then back at his daughter, the person she had become, not despite adversity, but because of it. "I will," he promised, words carrying the weight of genuine commitment. As the sun set over Manhattan, Beatriz felt a sense of completion. The circle had closed. The adversity that had once seemed like an ending had revealed itself as a beginning, a painful but necessary catalyst for becoming who she was meant to be. 5 years after the Morgan scandal first broke, Beatriz stood before a university auditorium, filled with graduate students. Now the ethics director at Ethical Horizons, which had grown into a nationally recognized watchdog organization, she had been invited to speak about financial integrity and personal transformation. The ancient Stoics believed that prosperity often obscures the path to virtue, she began. "It's easy to believe you're a good person when you've never been tested. It's easy to think you're strong when you've never faced real weakness." The audience listened intently as she shared her journey from privileged oblivion through devastating loss to meaningful purpose. What I've come to understand is that adversity is not punishment, it's education. Each challenge we face reveals something about our character, either a strength to be celebrated or a weakness to be strengthened. In the front row sat Michael, now her husband, alongside Eleanor and Richard. Her father, still on parole, had secured a position teaching ethics, courses to business students, his knowledge of financial manipulation now used to prevent others from following his path. Many of you will face professional situations where ethics and profit seem to conflict, Beatriz continued. In those moments, remember that temporary gain achieved through compromise creates a fragile success. True achievement, the kind that lets you sleep at night, comes from alignment between your actions and your principles. After her lecture, a young woman approached. "I was 12 when your father's fraud was exposed," she said quietly. "My family lost everything. For years I hated your name." Beatriz nodded, acknowledging the pain without defensiveness. "But watching what you've built," the woman continued, "it helped me understand that we aren't defined by what happens to us, but by what we do with it." That evening, in the garden of the modest home she shared with Michael, Beatriz opened her journal, the same practice she had begun in her tiny apartment years ago. She wrote, "Marcus Aurelius said, 'The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The greatest gift of my life was losing everything I thought mattered, only to discover what truly does. Not possessions or status, but purpose. Not comfort, but character. Not avoiding pain, but finding meaning within it. The value of adversity lies not in the suffering itself, but in the person you become by facing it with courage and wisdom.' This is the final lesson of Stoicism, that in our response to life's challenges, we create ourselves." She closed the journal and looked up at the stars, feeling neither pride in her accomplishments nor regret for her losses, but a profound gratitude for the journey that had transformed her.